So Kubrick's got Napoleon on his mind, and you can already start to see a few things. Like quite a few people have compared Kubrick to Napoleon, said like he would have made an amazing field commander. And the things he picks up in Napoleon are like the planning, the way you have to be in charge of absolutely everything, which of course Kubrick did. He made sure he controlled the lighting, he operated the camera a lot himself, he did a lot of the editing himself. Kubrick, down to even supervising the trailers and the looping and the color grading. Kubrick tried to have command of absolutely everything because he was a perfectionist. Um, he saw a lot of that in Napoleon in how he would command things and how even on the eve of battle he'd be there doing paperwork. He loved that. But also that sort of personal sexual angle, the reference to Arthur Schnitzler.
He was the man who wrote the book that Eyes Wide Shut was based on,
Precisely,
correct?
Traumnovelle. I mean, we've got to do this every episode because it's always the road to Eyes Wide Shut. Everything is building up to Eyes Wide Shut. In fact, in his script, there's an episode where Napoleon visits a prostitute and later attends an orgy and feels like a bit of an outsider.
That feels quite familiar.
Yeah, it all heads to Eyes Wide Shut. I'm telling you guys. So he'd got his script and he wanted to get going on this. Now, unlike Clockwork Orange, where he could scout for locations using just architectural magazines and tear them out when he found something interesting. This one he had to do a lot of prep work for. MGM was supporting him, so he knew he could spend. He got 20 postgraduate researchers from Oxford reading every book going on Napoleon, summarizing it for him, putting it in his elaborate file system. So he's got his researchers working on it huge amounts. He uses high up contacts in I think the French Culture Ministry to get behind the scenes pass, basically an all access pass for his main man at the time, a really interesting guy by the name of Andrew Birkin. And I told this story on our first recording of this cursed episode. Andrew Birkin is a story you'd love, Josh. I mean, it's rags to riches. Andrew Birkin was a T-boy on 2001, and when Kubrick was trying to arrange for the footage of the apes having their fight, he didn't want to shoot it in studio, he wanted it on location. And he was saying, look, there's got to be somewhere in Britain we can do this. There's got to be some desert environment in Britain we can use. And Andrew Birkin, the T-boy, says, oh yeah, there is. He's just there listening. He says, yeah, I know somewhere. All the other production staff are sort of floored by this, and Kubrick says, right, go to it, find me, get me production stills. And so Andrew Birkin, only 18 at that time, I believe, gets himself given a camera, tips on how to write a production sheet, and goes off. Now, the only problem is he was talking out his arse and he didn't know if there was a place. But he figured he can come up with something. He goes home, he consults geography encyclopedias, and finds out there's actually a location that might do outside of Liverpool. And so,
Of course, Liverpool.
yeah, he catches the overnight train. He goes out there. He's there at about 4 a.m. taking the shots and everything, getting no sleep, comes back, delivers Kubrick the set report with all the photos, and then goes and crashes. And he comes back the next day and finds out he's called into the head office. And they say, right, what are you on now? And he says, well, I'm a T-boy, I don't make much. And they say, yeah, Stanley called us and said, you're now a production assistant and we're tripling your pay. So absolute Chad, given that he completely blagged it.
And there's a lot of initiative to show.
Oh, totally. You will see throughout, okay, there is more than a little bit of nepotism. If you date one of Stanley's daughters, you're going to become a production assistant. There's no way around it. But if someone shows a bit of initiative and willing, Stanley would promote you. You could just jump up. Where there was competence, he would give you a role. So Andrew Birkin becomes one of these go-to guys in a way that Anthony Fruel was before and after, and Leon Vitali, who we'll meet in the next film, would become. And I think his ability to bend the rules appealed to Kubrick a certain amount. So he's a guy sent out to scout locations for Napoleon. He's doing this in sort of very sensitive historical sites, trying Napoleon's ring on, sitting on his commode and breaking it. things like that. Lots of effort is going into the production. They make a deal with the Romanian army to get 30,000 troops to play the roles of the soldiers, which is quite amazing. Like the thought of doing 30,000 costumes. So it was all set up to be spectacular, and it was going to be a whole period of life film, somehow coming in at 3 hours. I have my doubts.
Yeah, this has the makings of something that should have been 10 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. So all the work has gone into it, but it gets stalled a bit. There's while he's doing that, so he decides, okay, I'm going to do Clockwork Orange. He he can do that much quicker and easier. And then in about 74, 73, he's coming back to it. Okay, we're going to do Napoleon. But unfortunately, his big supporter in MGM Studios, Robert O'Neill, leaves and is replaced by Louise Polk. And Louise Polk doesn't think there's much ground in Napoleon. There'd just been a Russian film, Waterloo, with, I've forgotten his name, gosh darn it. There'd just been the Russian film Waterloo, which had not delivered the financial success the studio wanted. And so she thought, there's no legs in this. And she wouldn't put up the money. And so, sadly, Stanley had done all this effort for Napoleon and sort of had to shelve it. But
was it with MGM that he made Barry Lyndon?
Gosh, I believe it is.
So
it might be Warner Brothers, actually.
Oh, okay.
I apologise.
Because it would have been remarkable if they'd gone, well, we don't have the money for Barry Lyndon. For Napoleon, but we do have the same money or something similar for an adaptation of a very obscure novel.
Yeah, well, it was
about an Irishman.
It wasn't going to be as big as Napoleon, but he still spent 11 and a bit million on Barry Lyndon, whereas
which I'm sure was a lot for the time.
Well, Clockwork Orange was only 1.3 million, and it brought in 114 million in the box office. So
that's some good profits.
It's pretty darn good. He also, fascinatingly, wanted Jack Nicholson to be Napoleon, which I think would be. I mean, I love the idea.
70s Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, think about it.
Around the era of Chinatown, I can see it.
Yeah, but that's sort of how Jack Nicholson comes onto Stanley's radar. But alas, it was not to be. As we're time compressed, I will leave it there and not torment you with what could have been. But luckily, a lot of his research did then fuel Barry Lyndon, which was much easier to make, was approximately the same period. Stanley already had a feel for the culture of the time,
And he had a lot of red coats left over.
Yes. It wasn't the most well-known of William Thackeray's novels, and I think that's why Stanley went for it. He felt Vanity Fair had basically been done. People were expecting it, whereas people didn't know much about, was it The Life and Times of Barry Lyndon Esquire? I may have the title wrong there. But again, classic Kubrick. Take another author's work, and from there, do what you will with it. He does make some changes, some of them which seem quite good. He's removing quite a few large coincidences that power the plot, like Barry being secretly related to the Marquis de Bellibelli. I hate saying that word, it sounds so stupid.
It's
meant to be Bally Barry, but in an Italian pronunciation.
Right. So for the plot that we see in the film, that feels like it would have been completely unnecessary to anything. I actually quite like the sentimentality of how it is presented in the film, which is not, oh, I'm secretly related to you. It's, I'm an Irishman on the continent coming across for the first time in years another Irishman. And so there's that immediate connection, and that's why they support one another.
It feels so true. However, I'm very aware that a lot of people will not have seen Barry Lyndon.
Which you should. You should watch Barry Lyndon. It's wonderful.
Totally. Like, it's 3 hours. It is quite punishing, but if you're not used to it, I mean, but what did Putin rewarding. Say? It's very brief history of Barry Lyndon. I understand you're bored, but
well, even then, it's 3 hours long. But for the amount of subject matter that it covers, to give you the full experience of this man's adult life is really, really well done, and you get all of the major parts of it. The first half of it is more about his rise, and the second half is how he comes into his complacency once he has achieved success and gets to his fall. The narration of it sums it up quite nicely when you get to the part where he begins to go on the downturn with his life, which is that the kinds of qualities in a man that allow him to reach success are often the ones that cause him to fail afterwards. So it's about a tale of ambition and general mickery.
Oh, absolutely, and we will delve into that fantastic mickery. But something I said the first time we went for this is, I think there's a like cheeky wink being done by Stanley Kubrick when making this film, because there are so many parallels to A Clockwork Orange, whereas that took all the heat. It feels like Kubrick was saying, I can tell you a lot of the same story, and no one will care. In fact, it'll get a nice PG rating, even though this one is also filled with boobs and violence. But
hey, there's only 2 sets of visible tits in the film, and then also 1 implied set of tits later on when his wife is is in the bathtub.
True.
With some robes over. So there is less. There is still some, though. He had to get them in there. It's Stanley Kubrick, after all.
It's one, but both of them tales of a juvenile, undesirable background, faking his way into society, ingratiating himself with masters on spurious grounds, indulging his whims, all to a classical music soundtrack. I mean, it's the same film, right?
If you would like to see the full version of this premium video, please head over to lotuseaters.com and subscribe to gain full access to all of our premium content.